There's a moment many of us have lived through, especially when we're caught in a fast pace and the pressure to achieve. You look at the vision board hanging on the wall. Shimmering images, hopeful affirmations, a 5-year plan scribbled in a rush of inspiration on New Year's Eve. And you wonder, why is it that the more I look at it, the more tired I feel? Why is it that the more I set goals, the more I feel dragged out of the present? If you're sitting in that exact feeling, don't just throw away that meaningless vision board. Take one step further in your mind. One symbolic step. Allow yourself to end the clinging. Tear up that dreamy 5-year plan you wrote. While the champagne haze from New Year's Eve hadn't even fully faded, those journals where you beg the universe to hand you what you want, allow yourself to close them. Not to deny your dreams, but to reclaim your power right now. Because the truth is, if you're using those things like a charm to soothe yourself, they aren't helping you at all. They're holding you back, systematically making you soft. And here is the raw truth no self-help master dares to tell you. Because it's cold, these items can easily become psychological opiates. They're a refined defense mechanism, creating the illusion of control while you hand your power away. They turn you into a servant of a perfect, dazzling future, a future that doesn't exist the way you think it does. You've been programmed to believe that success requires a fixed goal, a defined destination. But look at your own life. Really look at it. Has chasing that finish line made you stronger, or has it only fed your chronic anxiety? When you place your entire worth into an outcome you can't predict, you've quietly shifted your locus of control? You've moved your power outward. You stop trusting your actions. You start trusting the luck of results. And then a ruthless loop forms. The tighter you cling to the goal, the more powerless you feel in the face of variables. You become someone living dependent on a future you cannot guarantee. And here, there's a deeper layer. One you'll recognize if you're brave enough. Dependence on goals, and the act of announcing them, exposes something more hidden. The shadow, in Carl Jung's sense. Public goals are often just a performance of counterfeit ambition, a thin shield raised to cover the naked fear of failure. We boast about plans, not because we intend to execute every step, but because we want the perfect excuse. If we fail, we can easily blame fate, blame that the universe didn't listen enough. That is a mechanism for avoiding radical responsibility. We crave power, but we fear the price of it. And then you'll notice a sharp difference between two kinds of people. Some live by desire and permission. But people who truly hold power do not operate on desire or permission. Niccolò Machiavelli, the most misunderstood strategist in history, looked at human nature with cold eyes, and he had no vision board. He didn't rely on hope. Hope is the currency of the weak when it's used as a substitute for action. Machiavelli relied only on Virtù, the blend of skill, sharp intelligence, and the ability to act decisively in the present. He didn't wait for a perfect future before taking power. He didn't ask the world for permission. Instead of drawing a flawless roadmap, Machiavelli cared about two things: the current reality, accurately assessing what is happening, not what he wanted to happen, and the next move, calculating the step that creates maximum advantage right now. Power doesn't live in you, reaching a pre-written destination. It lives in your absolute control over the process of movement. Stop dreaming about a grand victory. Start training the discipline required in the smallest actions of today. Strength doesn't live in the future you crave. It lives in the sober performance of this present moment. So if the majority is still trapped in the loop of failure, still believing that this time setting goals will be different, You can choose another path. See, the raw truth. A goal is often just a wish, clumsily disguised, with the thin shell of a plan. And what's the familiar psychological mechanism? The short-term satisfaction of setting a goal accidentally replaces the real hardship of carrying it out. People love the idea of winning, but they avoid the cost of persistence. But a method is different. A method is not a prayer. It is a sustained siege against your own old habits. It demands sober calculation and the ability to pull emotion out of the process. A method means arranging systems that ensure results get produced, whether your emotions feel like it or not. If you've exhausted yourself climbing the ladders of personal development only to realize they were leaning against the wrong wall, and the sunk cost fallacy keeps you from stopping because you're afraid of losing what you've invested, then maybe it's time for a more direct question. What am I trying to prove, and to whom? And if right now you feel tired, listen carefully to something that can be freeing. Your exhaustion is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence that the shadow in you is demanding something deeper and more real than empty promises. That selfish engine, your hunger for power, your hidden need to control beneath the nice exterior, if you dare to look it in the eye, may be your unmined source of energy. The problem isn't that you're bad. The problem is you haven't learned how to use that energy responsibly. This is self-conquest. It is a cold, direct confrontation to dominate your unreliable psychology. Dominate procrastination. Dominate fear. Dominate self-deception. It is the act of imposing a finely designed will upon the chaotic nature of being human. And right here, I want to pull you into a natural moment of interaction, because this story shouldn't be only me speaking while you listen. If you've ever set an enormous goal, and then found yourself only good at talking about it, not living it, you can leave a comment. No long explanation. Just one sentence. What insight you reaches for goals, as a form of self-soothing. Sometimes simply naming it is where you begin taking your power back, because most people live a life suspended in midair, a permanent state of becoming. They don't exist right now. They live inside, not yet, waiting for the promotion, the perfect relationship, a number in the bank account. They're trapped on the hedonic treadmill, always running, never arriving, because the finish line keeps changing shape. And the real engine hiding beneath the costume of goals is not the hunger for success, but the fear of exposure, the fear that without that title, they're just ordinary. They cover a deep inferiority complex with ambitious goals. They outsource their self-worth to future achievements. All it takes is one sudden shock from life, a market shift, a breakup, a personal failure, and they collapse completely. Not because the goal failed, but because they lose their internal ground. There's nothing solid inside to hold on to. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He called the violent, uncontrollable chaos of the world fortuna, the raging river of fate. Those who live on empty hope, leaning on future stability, have no virtù, no inner strength, to face it. If you foolishly build your house, your identity, your self-respect, on the banks of the Gold River, you will be swept away when the flood arrives. Don't search for wholeness in a conditional future. Find resilience and acceptance of your bare self in this very moment, where it cannot be stolen by any upheaval. And from there, we arrive at the core point. The fundamental mistake in most people's method is trying to build a castle on the riverbank, one fixed spot, easy to erode. Today, we stop building on that frail ground, and begin the process of becoming the river. We replace the brittle concept of goals with Machiavelli's concept of positioning. Positioning is the act of creating structural advantage. You arrange terrain. resources, and relationships, so the game is forced to play out on your terms. This is the pursuit of relative power. Ensuring your baseline advantage makes outcomes statistically close to inevitable. When you gain that structural edge, you stop caring about emotional scorecards like success or failure. You don't seek validation. You seek expansion. You don't arrive. You advance. But to do this, you must make one very clear inner move. You must end the dreamer in you, in the sense of stopping the feeding of a version of you that lives only on imagination. That inner child craves cheap dopamine, the instant rush of satisfaction from bragging about what it's going to do. Psychologically, this is self-sabotage through early praise-seeking. Be quiet. Stop handing out that shallow reward. Wake up the strategist in you, the one who demands concrete strength, silent strength, and knows how to delay gratification. The strategist never hopes, he maneuvers. Now ask yourself, nakedly, coldly, why do you set goals? When you write, I want to make $1 million, you are not drawing a map, you are confessing a present lack. You are desperately searching for comfort. You set goals because you're in pain. You don't want to deal with the chaos of the present, so the brain triggers a refined defense mechanism. It creates a fantasy future. The goal is not a compass. The goal is an escape tool. It reduces cognitive dissonance. You cannot accept the truth that your current self is unfinished. So you create a glorified future version of yourself to justify today's existence. The goal becomes psychological painkillers. It doesn't truly drive you to change. It numbs you. It numbs you to the brutal fact that right now, you are not yet the person you ache to become. And so your deepest craving is sometimes not achievement. Your deepest craving is escape from pain. Machiavelli, the master of practical politics, despised hope when hope is used like a mental sedative designed to keep people compliant in chaos. He saw it as outsourcing your power to an external force you cannot control. We fear chaos and the burden of responsibility so much that we keep painting a picture of the world as we want it to be, instead of facing it as it is. This is the moment we allow the shadow to take over. When you lock your vision onto a specific outcome, you activate a dangerous tunnel vision effect. Obsession creates rigidity. In nature, what's too rigid is easy to break. Flexibility is the highest form of power. And there's another trap few people will say out loud. The trap of validation. You've just made a strategic mistake. You've announced your intention. The moment you declare a goal, your brain gets a hit of dopamine, the same reward hormone you get when you complete a task. This is goal satiation. You receive social recognition, and psychologically, you've already done a significant part of it. You sell your action energy in exchange for a hollow feeling of accomplishment. You're not seeking discipline, you're seeking applause. And here's an uncomfortable social truth. The moment you announce ambition, you don't just create supporters. You can also create resistance. Your potential success becomes a mirror, reflecting other people's stagnation. They develop an unconscious desire. You must fail. This is the contrast effect in social behavior. Machiavelli called this kind of publicizing ambition a self-harm mistake. Real power isn't the ability to attract attention. It's the ability to control what others know. Machiavelli pointed out that you must master the art of the lion and the fox. The lion represents display. The fox embodies cunning and discretion. When it comes to building and protecting your own ambition, you must be the fox. Let others show off. Let them chase cheap validation from the crowd. While they're busy performing, step back into silence, work quietly, Accumulate advantage no one sees. Move in silence, and let your success be the only noise. And now, change the language you use to define success completely. Don't pursue a goal. A goal can be a plea, a public announcement of lack. Instead, build a secret agenda. An agenda doesn't care about permission. It's built inside, quietly, and it's hard to destabilize with opposition. It makes you indispensable, a technical or intellectual keystone. You don't ask for a promotion. You make the system forced to recognize your value. When you operate with a secret agenda, you walk differently. You're no longer trapped in the validation trap. A basic need of the ego that makes you fragile. You aren't anxious. You're observing. You're calculating. This concealment of intention creates a pool people can't quite name. They sense a stored reservoir of potential energy they can't measure. It creates cognitive dissonance in their minds, and that discomfort sometimes turns into reluctant respect. Then, sooner or later, Fortuna hits your life with a disruption. And here is the split between two paths. When a goal shatters, the goal setter collapses. They fall into paralysis, swallowed by a dark mood, because they invested too much of their identity into a rigid outcome. When the outcome is taken away, they no longer recognize themselves. Those who carry Machiavelli's spirit understand that Fortuna, fate, chaos, doesn't care about complaints. If you have a rigid goal, chaos is a threat. But if you own an adaptive system, chaos becomes fuel. Machiavelli said in spirit that it's better to act boldly than to be overly cautious, because Fortuna favors those who take initiative. But here, understand it in a way that fits modern life, and is kind to yourself. Initiative doesn't mean brutality. Initiative means not freezing. When plan A no longer fits, you don't sit there blaming yourself. You shift to the next move. You look at the new data. You adjust your approach. This is the essence of anti-fragility. Positioning yourself so you don't merely endure volatility. You learn from it. You grow through it. Someone obsessed with rigid goals is like a candle that trembles easily. Someone who masters a power method is a steady flame. Self-adjusting. You don't need perfect quiet. You need enough challenge to mature. You know that every headwind doesn't have to put you out. It can teach you how to burn properly, brighter, steadier, more stable. And this is the part many people will react to immediately, because it touches a habit of the times. We're encouraged to love ourselves, practice self-care. But when self-care is misunderstood as indulgence, it becomes a lullaby. It stops being therapy, and becomes delay. Unconditional love for your current self, without honesty, can easily make you accept mediocrity. The ego always seeks the path of least resistance. To escape this trap, you don't need to become a tyrant in an extreme sense. You need to become your own strict and fair leader. Fair means consistent. Strong means there are things you do not negotiate. Be afraid of the part of you that always compromises. Be afraid of the habit of delaying what matters. Be most afraid of the image of you 5 years from now. The version that wakes up with nothing to prove to yourself. Not to show anyone else, but so you know you lived truthfully. If you can't control the flow of your thoughts, someone else will do it for you. Establish law within yourself. I don't complain. Complaining is the language of someone who has surrendered the power to act. I don't react to insults. I analyze them. An insult is data. It reveals the weakness someone believes you have. If you violate your internal rules, the consequence must be recorded immediately. Not to punish, but to learn and correct. Be a fair king, and above all, be a strong king. Fairness is absolute consistency. Strength is non-negotiable compliance. So if we remove fixed goals, what replaces them? A system anchored by three basic pillars: position, leverage, and adaptability. Position is where you place yourself in other people's minds. It's how you take psychological high ground. The strong aren't merely capable. The strong make others believe they are the factor that guarantees stability. By projecting an image that is cold, mysterious, and hard to predict, you force others to speculate about your value. And their dependence sometimes becomes your protection.
If you crave wealth,
you don't necessarily have to glue your eyes to a numerical target. You can place yourself where that number is simply a transaction, where thinking in value and exchange happens every day.
If you want strength,
you position yourself in an environment of continuous resistance, hormesis, where you face Jung's shadow directly instead of hiding on a comfortable couch. Leverage is Machiavelli's cold, practical heart. It isn't about the assets you own. It's about your ability to control the most important variable in other people's lives. Leverage is the ability to create asymmetric dependence. It works by exploiting loss aversion. People fear losing what they already have, more than they desire what they don't yet have. The powerful don't need to threaten. They build structures, so others need them to maintain stability. And what matters is this: never confuse effort with effectiveness. The strategist seeks maximum results with the minimum necessary effort. Adaptability is the art of flow. Power doesn't live in rigidity, it lives in mobility. You must become water. Water always finds the path of least resistance, yet it maintains relentless forward pressure. If the obvious path, the door, has been locked, don't waste time pounding on it. That means a barrier has been erected. Immediately find the structural weakness, go through the window. Refusing to be limited is the core engine of accumulating real power. Strong people don't hesitate to abandon an outdated plan without regret. They understand that the accuracy of the map matters less than the ability to move across real terrain. And finally, there's a leak that drains you that you barely notice: emotional leakage. It's the moment you allow trivial emotions, irritation, the fear of being ignored, to seize control and dictate your long-term strategy. You think your anger is a strength, but in truth, it's primitive emotion taking the throne. It makes you easy to manipulate, turning you into a puppet reacting to invisible strings other people pull.
True stillness is not the absence
of feeling. It is separation from its influence. When you dare to erase those grand delusional goals and replace them with a continuously adaptive system, you stop looking desperate. You begin to taste a different feeling, that you can control the present. You're no longer rushing. You become someone who can adjust, learn, continue.
This is the Machiavellian path.
It can be lonely, because you no longer live on applause. But that loneliness is sometimes the condition that lets you hear your real voice clearly.
And if you want me to speak as plainly
as possible, there's one sentence that must be carved into you, soberly and responsibly, not to drop you into despair, but to steady you. No one is coming to save you the way you still dream. No miracle will do your work for you. But that doesn't mean you're alone in a painful sense. It only means power is in your hands. Only you can save yourself, in the sense that you lead yourself out of the old loop, and you will do it, not by begging, but by commanding your habits, commanding your time, commanding your choices. Stay alert. Stand guard. Over the throne of your mind. If you can't control the flow of your thoughts, someone else will do it for you. And maybe this is the most important point of the entire story. Life doesn't demand that you become perfect. It only demands that you become responsible. Today, just one thing. Don't promise more. Don't announce more. Just do one small thing, concrete enough, real enough, that you can look in the mirror and say, in a calm voice, I did the work.